Hello, Mustangs. This is Miss Vestal, and I'm here to read Chapter 15 of The Adventures of a South Pole Pig. And since Flora's staying in our room this week, I thought she might like to join us. Let's see what Flora is up to on the ship. Chapter 15. Flora woke up the next morning with a terrible headache, but also a change of heart. She staggered to her feet. "Enough," she said out loud. Sophia had been wrong when she said that pigs were like frogs. Pigs did have weapons. But what were they? Flora paced weakly back and forth. The chain around her neck clanked against the boards at every step. No answer came to her head. Flora ran her tongue over her teeth. They were great for chewing leftover scrambled eggs and watermelon rinds, but they didn't feel like weapons. And her hooves weren't sharp enough to put a hole through a paper bag unless it was wet. The door opened. "Good morning, delicious." Amos dropped the food into her bowl and ran his hands over Flora's ribs. "How is Amos's little sausage?" Spit flew from his mouth with every word, and then he was gone. Flora fixed her gaze on the dark corners as she warily moved over her bowl. She didn't take a bite. Slither, click. She could hear tails sliding and toenails tapping just out of sight. Then a low tide of hissing rats flowed forward in a half circle in front of her. Flora realized she was more than 5 times as big as the largest one. None of them even came up to her chin. That gave her some confidence, but not much. She wanted to stamp her feet, but she was afraid her trembling knees would collapse. She tried to calm her beating heart. In the center of the mass, the Rat King stepped forward. He opened his mouth impossibly wide, like an enormous yawn, and then brought his teeth together in a loud snap. In the next instant, Flora was attacked. She swung her head, sending a couple of rats tumbling, but it didn't stop the crash of fur and teeth. Some jumped on her back, while others went at her underbelly with sharp bites. She came down hard on her front feet, trying to stomp a hairless tail or two, but the rats were too fast. Flora scrambled backwards, and as soon as she moved away from the bowl, the rats called off their attack and scurried to get their share of slops. Flora looked down at her shoulders. They were covered with scratches and drops of blood. She felt dazed. Nothing had prepared her for an enemy so fearsome. Flora recalled Luna's attack on the barn rat. What would Luna do with a whole thieving bunch of ship rats? Well, she wouldn't give up, that's for sure. "I won't give up either," Flora thought, trying to find the courage to believe the words. "I can't give up. They're eating my only food." Over the next few days, Flora had to be satisfied with a small victory that kept her from starving. When Big Amos came down with her food, she found she could eat 4 bites by swallowing without chewing before he clomped away. By stamping her feet, she could usually keep the rats at bay and grab one more bite before the entire crew gathered. They were brave only in a large group. She also knew that when she backed off quickly, they would leave her alone. But all of this meant she still got little to eat. Yet Flora was determined not to give up on her dream. She continued to pull her box back and forth to improve her strength. And sometimes she practiced going a little crazy, prancing on her hind legs, shaking her head, and snorting. And all the while she would whisper to herself, "Don't give up." The training always tuckered her out, which was just as well. It was easier for her to drift off to sleep at the end of the day. One night, curled up tight to stay warm, she saw 2 stars appear in the blackness. In her hazy half-sleep, she didn't question how stars could come down from the sky and shine in the hold of a ship. She just watched the tiny glimmers of light and remembered that night on the dock, the 2 stars twinkled, and then they blinked. Flora sat up and grunted, her chains clinking softly. Stars didn't blink. She waited. The pair of lights developed a furry face around them. "Cat attack," said the face. "Sophia!" squealed Flora. "You changed your mind. You came with us. All right, that's the end of chapter 15. So tune in tomorrow to see what happens with Sophia and Flora.